you display your name and full name and the media you are representing when you're going to be asking a question. And I'm going to also ask you that you raise the little hand on the MS Team function or write in the chat that you have a question. To minimize the connection issue, we're going to remain off camera except when we're asking the question. So right now I will give the floor to Dr. Fan.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. The RCMP launched a race-based data collection initiative in detachments in Whitehorse, Yukon, Wood Buffalo, Alberta, and Thompson, Manitoba on January 8th, 2024. 2 additional pilot sites, one in British Columbia and one in Nova Scotia, will follow later this year. The goal of this initiative is to collect and analyze race-based data to better understand the experiences of Indigenous, Black, and other racialized individuals and communities in their interactions with RCMP frontline officers. This data, along with meaningful engagement with communities and frontline police officers, will help determine the steps the RCMP must take to address systemic racism. We anticipate the pilot will last 1 year, after which the data will be analyzed and findings publicly reported. I'll conclude by noting that addressing systemic racism and discrimination is an organizational priority for the RCMP. The RCMP wants to thank all those who participated in public consultations throughout 2022 and 2023, especially those communities who will be taking part in the pilot. I will turn it over to my colleague to deliver these remarks in French, after which we will be happy to take your questions.
Bonjour. La GRC lance un projet pilote de collecte de données sur les races de ce détachement à Whitehorse au Yukon, à Wood Buffalo en Alberta et à Thompson au Manitoba le 8 janvier 2024. 2 jours de site, un en Colombie-Britannique et un en Nouvelle-Zélande. Cette initiative vise à recueillir des données sur les races et les analyser afin de mieux comprendre les vécus expérientiels des personnes des communautés autochtones, noires et racisées dans leur interaction avec les policiers de la première ligne de la GRC. Ces données ont un dialogue constructif avec les communautés concernées et les policiers de première ligne nous aideront à déterminer les mesures que doit prendre la GRC pour éliminer le racisme systémique. Le projet pilote devrait durer 1 an et les données seront ensuite analysées et les constatations seront publiées. En terminant, je tiens à préciser que le racisme systémique et la discrimination est une priorité pour la GRC. La GRC remercie ceux et celles qui ont pris part aux consultations publiques menées en 2002 et 2023 et les communautés qui participeront à ce projet en 2024.
Et au caporal Lavoie. Je vais juste réitérer que l'entrevue est présentement enregistrée à des fins de suivi. Maintenant, on va passer à la période de questions. Je vais vous demander, si vous avez une question, de lever la petite main qui se situe et puis je vais vous demander de rester mode sourdine ainsi que ne pas apparaître à la caméra avant que vous soyez autorisé à poser votre question. Like we said, we have about 20 minutes for those questions to be asked today, and I'm going to be naming every one of you guys that would have a question. So right now, I have Josh Crabb that I see. So Josh, go ahead with your question.
Just making sure you can hear me okay before I go further?
Yes.
Great. Yes, I'm a reporter with CBC in Manitoba, and I'm just wondering if you can walk us through how this data will be collected. Like, will it be frontline officers ask one to voluntarily declare their race? What can you tell us about how that's working?
Thank you so much for the question. So the way that we are collecting race-based data under this initiative is officer perception. Officer perception is an important metric to identify whether perceived race or perceived Indigenous identity is a factor or influences outcomes for different groups of people. And we will be using that data to analyze our impacts and outcomes for community groups in the pilot locations. So we will not be asking individuals to self-identify that information.
Josh, are you good, or do you need a follow-up?
Yeah, I guess I would like to maybe just get you to some of the difficulties about with that, using having an officer determine what race someone. I'm wondering sort of how that will work, or if there's any, I guess, training or to make sure that's right.
Yes, that's it. That is important to ensure that we are collecting the right information from officers, and that officers understand what this collection entails of them. We do have training provided. We have also engaged in all of the pilot sites with members to hear their concerns and questions around this collection. We also explain the value and the validity of perception data for understanding implicit biases, unconscious biases in decision making, and how this data will help us to improve our policies, our procedures, and our training. We also engage with communities in all the pilot sites as well around this collection, and had a chance to speak with them and hear their thoughts and concerns around perception data, and also to be informed by their experiences with systemic racism and interpersonal racism, and how perception often does play a role in that. And so communities have also validated this approach.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now go to Jim Elliott. Jim, I believe you are with the Yukon News, right?
Yes, Jim Elliott from the Yukon News speaking. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the question I had sort of deals with outcomes of this. Like, I understand this is a year-long trial that's going on, and I was just wondering, like, supposing at the end of the year-long trial, it's discovered that a particular RCMP detachment is having noticeably more interactions, or a disproportionate number of interactions with people of a certain race. Has there been any discussion about how that revelation could be addressed, or what actions the RCMP might take?
Thank you for that question. Yes. So the purpose of race-based data collection is precisely to identify where we are having disparate impacts and disparities in outcomes, and what we can do about it in order to improve the way that we respond to situations and calls for service. And so our approach and our intention is to continue to engage with frontline members, to continue to engage with community organizations in the pilot detachments, particularly around how should we analyze the data, how should we interpret the findings to understand what is happening, and then to develop action plans. The end goal is to have some concrete initiatives and solutions to improving our policies, our training, and like I said, our procedures, if that is where the findings are pointing us to. We intend to, at the end of the day, publicly report the findings, as well as commitments to change.
Okay, thank you. And I do have a follow-up if there's time. I was just in the material that we were provided. It says that officers can record Indigenous identities in 5 different categories. I was just wondering if you could expand upon the training that officers receive. When it comes to dealing with people with those Indigenous identities, and also if there is any training around people who, maybe have a mixed background and more than one of those identities.
Are you referring to training around how to collect race-based data when it comes to those identities?
Yes. Thank you.
Specifically? Okay, yes, I'll just clarify your question. Thank you. So their perception of an individual's race or Indigenous identity should be based on their observation of the individual. We know racialization is the process in which you categorize individuals into boxes. We do that all the time. You know, that's just how society works, right? And so we communicate to officers that this is their best guess based on their observation, but also what information they may already know about the individual based on previous interactions, based on knowledge of the family or the community which they are responding to. The 5 categories that you speak of, just for folks on the line, is First Nations, Métis, Inuit, unknown Indigenous identity. So that's, we clarify with officers that that is used where they perceive the individual to be Indigenous, but they aren't sure, don't know how to, which particular sub-identity, and not perceived to be Indigenous identity. So those are the 5 options for officers to select. When we engage with Indigenous organizations and communities, they communicated the importance of taking a distinction-based approach. We know that Indigenous communities are diverse, and there is an interest in understanding if there are disparities for specific Indigenous groups as well.
Thank you very much, Jim. I'm going to go now to Terry Davidson.
Hi, good afternoon. Maybe, boy, there are a lot of unanswered questions here. Maybe you could give some other examples of what individual officers are going to be asked. I think there's still some haziness around exactly what they're going to be asked, how they're going to be engaged with. And also there are concerns like racism, be it systemic or blatant, is a hot subject in the news right now. It's all over the place, particularly when it comes to police, and it's been that way since the George Floyd killing, especially. And there's some smart police officers out there who maybe already know that their views wouldn't be seen as appropriate. Is there concern that answers could be crafted by some officers so as to fly under the radar, so they're able to say, well, I don't want to appear to have sort of some racist views, or that may be racist views, so you know what, I'm just going to basically give them the answers that I think they want. And also, are officers allowed to opt out of this in any way?
Thank you, Terry. Those are great questions. And we hear that a lot, those concerns, when we engage with communities. First of all, the data collection is part of our operational reality. We collect a lot of data, and this is just one piece. Officers, are asked to provide their perception of an individual's race in every interaction they have, including in use of force reports. And so the collection of this data is part of their operational reality and requirements. It is mandatory, so they cannot opt out of it. There are a pick list for them to select from. And it is part of their requirement. So not selecting or not complying or selecting an option, a response option that is unreasonable would be part of not providing, not keeping good records, right? So it is a requirement in their operational reality to provide as accurate a record as they are able to in their day-to-day interactions. I don't know if that answers your question, but again, the perceived race and Indigenous identity is about their perception of the individual they are interacting with. It's not about racism. It's okay to perceive someone as East Asian or white or Black. Where it's not okay is if that informs a differential treatment. And that cannot be determined by the collection of race-based data itself. That would be revealed through analysis of the aggregate data, the summary statistics that may show differential trends, and could point to whether there are biases in the way that we operate.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fan. I'm going to go with, I have someone at CBC. I don't have the person's name, but if you're the CBC guest in the room, please identify yourself.
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have specified CBC Yukon. I'm wondering, that analysis you just described, will that be done internally, or are you hoping that might be done by researchers or by an external organization on what this data really means?
Thank you. Yes, we do plan to procure independent researchers to support with the analysis of this data. We will also be working, our team, we have a dedicated team who bring in subject matter expertise to engage with communities and our members on the ground to inform an analytic plan. So in other words, we will be asking them, how should we look at this data? What questions do you have that the data could answer? And what questions, what are the data gaps, right? So we will be having that conversation to ensure that the analysis is grounded in community and member perspectives.
Thank you. Is it possible to have one follow-up?
Absolutely. I just want you to state your name for us, please.
Oh, yes, Katrin Pilkington. So I guess I'm just wondering if the data will be shared in full with the public, sort of in a quantitative manner, or will it be more of a report that summarizes the conclusions and more of like a qualitative summary?
The intention and the commitment is to provide open data, anonymized, de-identified data to the public, and bring it back to the communities and the public for their own analysis and research. But we will also be publicizing the reports that come out of this research.
Thank you.
Then I have to apologize to Sherry. Sherry, you're going to be the next one. I'm sorry, you were supposed to be my next in the queue, but I just saw we had that CBC and I got you guys confused. So go ahead, Sherry, for your question.
No problem. I'm a little confused though. If the RCMP already do this race-based data collection, what is the point of this pilot project? What's different?
So let me clarify, when I said this is already a part of their operational reality, what I meant was that data collection, right? And when it comes to certain data, like for example, sometimes, the 911 caller will provide race data as part of that. It was a white female, it was a, an East Asian male, whatever, that information is captured in our records management system. So this is not an alien concept to officers. Subject descriptors, physical descriptors are collected. They're just not collected consistently. They're not collected all the time, and they're collected in a variety of different ways. So this pilot ensures that there's consistent methodology around the collection and that it's collected in all of our interactions so that we have robust data as a foundation for understanding our impacts in a systematic way. This will allow us to, test, drive, and identify best practices in community engagement and involvement in the way that we use our data, the way we handle this data, and also, identify the gaps in our current, systems in how it can be captured accurately, quality controlled, and all of that. So, one of the big pieces that this pilot project helps to inform is a national rollout event down the line, but also systems upgrades. RCMP has committed to modernization of its technologies, and so this will be part of those of that bigger commitment as well.
Okay, so follow up. How would an incident that saw Chief Alan Adam arrested in March 2020, in which there was violence and he was bruised. Charges were dropped on June 24th. How would that be caught in the data collected? Is there any context that would go along with that when the data is analyzed and publicly reported?
I won't be able to comment on specific cases, but if you're using that as an example, this data, is not intended to support individual cases or case by case and, identification of specific outcomes. Rather, it's to support statistical analyses to identify systemic issues in how we, in how we respond to specific incidents. So with each individual case, it will contribute to that broader picture. So as an example of something like that, we would be able to contextualize outcomes in certain kinds of situations, certain kinds of 911 calls, and looking at, what were the outcomes and how do they differ from group to group.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Je vais maintenant aller du côté de Evelyne Côté.
Oui, Evelyne Côté de Radio-Canada. Je voulais savoir quel genre de formation ont reçu les policiers qui participent au projet pilote et on parle de combien de policiers?
Corporal Lavoie, you're on mute right now. Je vous entends toujours pas. Dr. Fan, the question is...
Allô?
Est-ce que c'est revenu? Oui, et voilà. Merci,
Oui, c'est
Mathieu.
revenu. Désolé pour le contretemps.
Il n'y a pas de problème.
Madame, est-ce que vous pourriez reposer votre question, s'il vous plaît?
Oui, je voulais savoir combien, en fait, c'était quoi la formation qu'ont reçu les policiers qui participent au projet pilote? Puis, on parle de combien de personnes qui ont été formées?
Pour ce qui est de comme sommes tous les policiers attitrés à la patrouille générale, ont d'abord rencontré le groupe qui ont fondé le projet pilote comme séance d'information. Nous avons été informés qu'il y avait des données sur les races avec les agents de perception. Elle a commencé à être collectée le 8 janvier. Et puis après, on a eu une formation sur Agora. C'est un système automatique que les policiers reçoivent l'entraînement en ligne. Les policiers ont complété cet entraînement-là. Puis le 8 janvier, les rapports sur la collection des races ont commencé.
Est-ce que je peux faire une sous-question? Donc, on parle d'une formation de combien de temps? Qui a duré combien de temps?
C'est moi que je peux me rappeler, la séance d'information était durant l'après-midi. Et puis, le cours en ligne était environ 1 heure à compléter, plus le matériel à lire. Vous pouvez demander jusqu'à 3 heures.
So, Dr. Fan, I'm just going to ask a question in English. Maybe you can provide more. So she was asking, how long was the formation lasting for the members that will be having to record that collection, and what's the number of police officers that were trained to receive and be able to collect the data? You're on mute, Dr. Fan.
Of course. Thank you for the question. So all employees in the detachments have to complete the training, is required training for all employees, including frontline officers, particularly who will be collecting the data. We have required all employees to take the training so that everyone has a good understanding of the purpose behind this data, how it will be used, and the importance of it, as well as the step-by-step of the collection requirements. Officers will be required to collect this data for 1 year under the pilot project. We have already begun tracking lessons learned, best practices to help inform the national rollout where it will be across the country.
And right now, as per the detachment, is there a number of police officers that were trained within who's doing the collection?
I don't have that number at my fingertips, but we can come back to that.
No problem. Bon, alors, Evelyne, je vais juste vous dire le commentaire en français pour être sûr que vous l'avez. Donc, tous les employés des détachements où est-ce que la collection des données va se faire ont été entraînés, mais on ne peut pas vous dire combien il y en a qui l'ont reçu. Ça va vraiment avec la grosseur du détachement et le nombre de membres qui répondent à des appels à ces endroits-là. On va pouvoir vous trouver le numéro de membre, par exemple. On va faire une question qui va vous être répondue par courriel plus tard parce qu'on n'a pas l'information avec nous tout de suite. Est-ce que ça répond à votre question?
Oui, c'est bon. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. And then I see that we have Josh Crabb coming back for another question. Josh, the floor is yours.
Can I ask a question of Corporal Avoy? Is that all right? Right?
Yeah, Corporal Avoy.
Okay. I guess kind of fold that. I'm assuming you have training, and as a frontline officer in Thompson, how do you hope it helps your interactions with the people in the community?
Well, the Thompson detachment is one of the busiest detachment in the RCMP. So as per number of people we deal with, is one of the highest in the Manitoba for sure. By collecting data, we're hoping by the numbers we're going to collect with the analysis, we're gonna give a good idea for the search and give some orientation of what the RCMP is doing for systemic racism.
And if I can just ask as a follow-up, and this might be for Dr. Finn, but you mentioned the the groups of how officers would identify Indigenous people by First Nation, Métis, Inuit, unknown, not perceived to be Indigenous. And I'm sorry if I missed this number about other racialized groups. I only see Black people mentioned. Will other racialized groups be further broken down? Can you just explain that?
Yes, thank you for that question. It's an important one. So in our data collection, the RCMP is using the Ontario Anti-Racism Data Standards to categories, and that includes 7 categories of racialized categories, and that is white, Black, East, Southeast Asian, South Asian, Middle East, Latino, and Indigenous. So those are the categories, and then a separate field for collecting the perceived Indigenous identity broken out into the distinct categories.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to go through the chat portion of the question. We had Terry Davidson. Would you do you want to go ahead with your extra question?
Yeah, sorry. I'm scrolling up. I forgot what it was for a second there. Well, this, again, this is just based on my own ignorance because I'm still a bit cloudy as to everything that's going to be examined. But will this include stops, just the most intimate kind of interaction between police officers and citizens, where citizens are stopped to be asked questions, no matter how innocuous those questions may be, or any kind of interaction that would be categorized sort of colloquially as a stop? Will those be examined as part of this project as well?
I appreciate that question, Terry. In this pilot, we are not collecting in stops. We understand that that type of interaction is of concern to members of the public and racialized communities, However, there are limitations in our current data collection systems where we don't have the capability of collecting in all stops. In order to meet the needs of having a robust data foundation for understanding, systemic disparities in those kinds of outcomes, we need that. And so this pilot will help us to refine and improve how we can collect and get started in the areas that are also important to the members of the public as we, improve our systems and work out solutions to get us there. So at this time, STOPS is not part of our collection, but we are collecting in wellness checks. We are collecting to understand, outcomes in arrests and outcomes of use of force. That means collecting in all of our interactions where we engage with a member of the public. And that member of the public, is not a victim, not a missing person, not witness. However, they are a focus of the investigation. And so that will give us a place to start, understand, improve, and prepare us for national rollout and potential expansion.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. Last question, Catherine from CBC Yukon. Go ahead.
Yeah, on that last note, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the selection process for the cities that have been chosen for the pilot. Were they cities where there were some kind of additional concerns around sort of that made them stand out? Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. We selected, the team actually had gone around to different detachments in the beginning of 2022 to engage with members and communities. And part of that engagement was to do an assessment of which sites would be ideal for race-based data. And we looked at it through different lenses. First of all, we looked at the local demographics of the community. We also engaged with communities to understand the issues, the nature of their relationship with RCMP, and engage with our members as well to hear from their perspectives. And we assess these sites, to determine whether race-based data will have a positive and meaningful impact to help us understand and address those issues. We also looked at community support, as well as division and detachment support, so leadership and member support for this kind of data collection and project. It allows us to identify strengths and weaknesses in order to better support our members when it goes nationally, but also to test out best practices. We also looked at community support and leadership and stakeholders in the different areas. So we spoke with municipal as well as provincial stakeholders to see what other anti-racism work is happening at different levels and across different sectors that we can leverage and build on. So all of these factors combined has contributed to the selection, and Whitehorse stood out as a very strong and positive site for us to learn a lot from. There are growing diversity, increasing diversity, and emerging issues that police have to contend with, and we have strong support from communities and the members there. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I feel like we kind of answered your question, Sherry, with the last question that was asked. Is there anything else you wanna quickly put in, or you're okay with the answer that was just provided for why the Yukon was chosen?
Well, it wasn't just the Yukon that I was looking at. Actually, what I want to know, and I want to confirm, that you did not receive input from Indigenous communities as to what areas you would be collecting race-based data in.
Thank you, Sherry. We did receive input from Indigenous communities. That was one of our top priorities in our engagement, was to ensure that every site we visited, we engaged with Indigenous communities and leaders to understand the issues and the historical context, as well as where the pain points were in their relationships with RCMP that we could support with this kind of data collection. Wellness checks is indeed one of those pieces, and we heard a lot about under policing, right? So not receiving the services they need, and so we have received some supports from Indigenous organizations and communities where we engaged.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Fan, and also to Corporal Lavoie. C'est ici que va se terminer la séance d'aujourd'hui. Merci de vous être joints à nous. Si vous avez d'autres questions, nous vous invitons à les transmettre aux relations avec les médias de la Direction générale. Ça va nous faire plaisir de vous répondre à vos courriels. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you very much to our subject expert matter. And if you have any other question that you feel that you need to ask, you can do it via the email inbox for the NHQ media relation, and it would be a pleasure for us to answer. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here today.
Thank you, everyone.